Hello, and welcome to the Skyleader 400. If you've been looking at Flyer over the last year or so, you'd have probably seen this pop up in the news and on various videos as we tracked its progress to the BMAA approval route for the 600 kilogram microlight category. This is now fully approved, and I'm glad to say we've got our hands on one to go flying. I think you'll agree, it's not a bad looking aircraft from a distance. Let's take a look around and look at some of the details. So, as you can see, the Skyleader 400 is equipped with a ballistic recovery chute. Essentially, as you probably know, a rocket in here that when it's fired, this cover pops off, the rocket fires out a couple of parachutes, and the whole airframe descends under silk, as they say, although I don't think it's silk anymore. Moving forwards, you've got another one of these exactly the same on the other side. Effectively, you undo these 3/4 turn fasteners. This hinges up and you have access to the engine. Talking of which, that's a Rotax 912 ULS 100 horsepower engine. Moving towards the front, here's the first time I've got something to say that's not entirely amazing. This is the 100 horsepower Rotax drives the E-props prop. I'm sure it's a very efficient prop. I'm sure it's a reliable prop. I'm sure it's a great prop. I just, coming from a slightly different world to the microlight world, where props are bigger and chunkier, I don't know, I kind of find it a little bit funny having these kind of toothpick props here. So I'm sure there are other props available, although I'm not sure if they're yet approved for this, but there are definitely other Rotax props available, but this wouldn't be my favourite. Pausing at the nose wheel, interestingly, this is a steerable nose wheel as opposed to a castering nose wheel, which a lot of aircraft of this kind of type do have. So I'm not sure how much the mini winglets actually contribute to performance or anything else, but they look pretty good, so I think they're a great addition. Moving along the wing, you see there's a fuel tank in each wing. They take 60 litres of fuel, so 120 litres in total. That's about 6 hours of endurance, 600 nautical miles in a still wind day. Don't forget though, 120 litres is going to weigh somewhere between 80 and 90 kilos, and with a useful load of 260 kilos, clearly, depending on how luxuriously you appoint your aircraft and how much kit you put in it, don't forget you got 85 litres if you take full fuel to take away from that. Under here, you'll see the main gear, and that is trailing link, which is well known for being very flattering, so hopefully that'll work for me later. To all intents and purposes, the Skyleader 400 is a fairly standard aircraft. It's a metal, side-by-side, two-seat aircraft with a Rotax 912 ULS. It does, however, have a unique feature I don't recall seeing on any other aeroplane quite in the same way, and that's the kind of gullwing entry into the cabin. I have to say, I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about this originally, but sort of standing by it and using it and seeing the way it works, it's pretty impressive. I can't wait to fly it just to see what it's like with the big central pillar. I have to say, the cockpit looks pretty bloody comfortable. It's spacious, it's got comfortable looking seats, find out a bit more about those later. There's a baggage area which is pretty good at the back. I mean, it's not huge, but it's big enough for a good weekend for a couple. Max 30 kilograms luggage though, and that doesn't just cost you more money like Ryanair. Inside, this one's laid out with sort of round analogy instruments, some of which are screens, which is kind of interesting. Personally, I'm a big fan of flat screens myself, but I guess not everybody is. The fuel cock there, interestingly, is not Andair. I'd like to see an Andair one because they're great people, great fuel cocks. Some nice little touches, little headset hangers there at the back, keep everything out of the way when you're not using them. No, all in all, this looks like a great place to spend a whole bunch of time. Apologies for the lack of sound. Our sound equipment decided to give up the ghost, and given that it was pretty hot outside as well, the GoPro also decided to turn itself off a couple of times. In fact, managed to bake a battery at the same time. When it came time to fly, Ashok was keen to stay in the left-hand seat. It's the position he's most familiar with, and just in case he needed to take over from me. Frankly, I respect that. It's better to be safe than sorry. It did, however, mean that I didn't have the easiest access to the trim, which in this particular Skyleader is operated by 2 buttons on top of the P1 stick. So any trimming would need me to be reaching over, grabbing another stick and prodding away at that at the same time. Anyway, we started up easily and taxied out. A quick word on taxiing out. As I said earlier, the nose wheel is a steerable nose wheel. In all honesty, I think that would probably be easier and better and lighter and simpler, maybe even a bit cheaper if it was just a fully castering nose wheel. Once we got in the air, hopefully you can see the conditions were pretty lively. It was a blustery day and there was some thermic activity going on, so we were getting knocked around a bit. Compared to some of the heavier aircraft I've flown, obviously the 600 kilogram microlight was getting moved around quite a bit, so it's something you're definitely going to need to get used to if you're coming from the heavier end of aviation. One thing I did notice was the stall warner seemed a little bit overcautious to me. It was chirping a few times and much earlier than I expect, even at one point chirping at about 65 knots, which, given that the VSO is only 41 knots on this particular airplane, that was quite ahead of time. I guess it was put down to the turbulence, but it seemed certainly a little bit early to me. The view forwards from the cockpit was pretty good. The central pillar didn't really have an effect. I mean, it's important to note, particularly, I'm coming from mainly a Cessna 182 or a Cessna 180. So high wing, once you've got a low wing, that takes away a chunk of your view directly down. You can see in front of the wing, and with the big seats, you can see behind the wing, but it's not as easy as it could be. It's certainly not a bubble canopy airplane. All in all, I was pretty impressed with it. As I said earlier, it was hard to gauge the handling forces all of the time because of the trim issue, but it certainly wasn't what I would call a twitchy airplane. You didn't have to worry about bunting your head into the canopy if you breathed on the stick and put it forwards or anything. So it was a pretty solid airplane, I would say, but it certainly wasn't. The bits of it that I managed to fly that were in trim and everything were pretty nice. I'd say it's a fairly solid aircraft, and certainly not twitchy or dull either. Coming back into land at Lideway, probably about, 300-400 feet, we were getting chucked about a bit by the turbulence coming off of various trees, hills and buildings around there. But by the time we got down to probably 150 feet, things calmed down. It was quite nice and quite easy to keep it in a fairly stable attitude, really, to come in, and a little bit of power cushioning the round out, which probably could have been a little bit more pronounced. Worked fine. So, having flown the Skyleader 400 for, half an hour, 40 minutes, what do I think? What is it? Well, to be honest, it's a very honest aircraft. It's really well made, it's comfortable, there's plenty of room in the cabin. If you come from something like a 182, like I have, it's twitchy, not in terms of handling, but in terms of handling the turbulence. In terms of handling, it's pretty solid. But the lighter aircraft, 600 kilogram max, all that weight, which is less than half of the 182, it gets thrown about a bit. And today is a pretty thermic day up there, and you can definitely feel it. And it certainly leads to a few interesting things at 300 feet on the approach when it's all going bumpy, 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 as it were. But yeah, no, a really good, honest, solid aircraft. You could buy these, depending on which version you buy, probably from about 120,000, including VAT, all the way up to 185, probably even more if you tried hard to spend more on it in terms of avionics, posh paint job and stuff like that. So, take your choice, but beware of not beware, but there's 250 in this particular aircraft, 249 kilos of useful load. So take care of that. You could easily take away another bunch of that just by adding extra things in. So overall, great aircraft, and an interesting contender in the 600 kilogram microlight class.